April, we need you. Liza, bring April in here.
You are not to use April as some sort of alter ego.
I love this.
April, the bacon's on fire.
It's very real.
All right. Welcome back to BrainStoke. This is Tom Telford. I'm here with Preston Ederhauser and also Liza Telford. We're so excited to have her with us here in the studio today. This episode is sponsored by Aspire Medical and also Aspire Counseling Network, which is where Liza Telford is practicing as a licensed marriage and family therapist. Today, we're going to dive back into some of the information we reviewed the last couple weekends with the Utah High School Cycling League.
Yeah, we had the opportunity as a team, BrainStoke team, to go down to Shields in Salt Lake, and then we went to Southern Utah University, where we had the chance to hold a training course with roughly 200 high school cycling coaches from the state of Utah. Really cool opportunity. It's a neat program. They coach roughly 7,000 kids in the state. So they have a huge influence, and they deal with a lot of the challenges that we see a lot of our youth face today. So it was a really cool opportunity to be able to talk to them about how to deal with the stressors and the anxieties that come with being on a cycling team and being a teenager. So that's where we had the opportunity to have Liza with us. And you guys all might have noticed that they both have the same last name. Can someone clarify?
This is amazing. This is a first, actually, that we're on a podcast together. We've spoken together a few times, but this is a first, being on a podcast at the same time.
You've been married how long?
24.
Tom?
Oh, it's actually a first for me to be able to say that first.
Okay.
Tom
We've
is
been
better
married
with numbers.
24 delightful years.
Good answer.
And actually, when we were in Southern Utah for the SUU coaches training, that was our 24th anniversary weekend, and so we got to celebrate together.
You got to spend that with me, actually.
Yeah, thank you, Preston.
Boom.
Yeah.
Boom. Liza, how come you're
Great
a
times.
therapist? Tell us about that.
Oh, that's a whole separate podcast.
Okay.
Honestly, I love how it relates to BrainStoke, because even on my bio on our website, I talk about always having enjoyed learning and understanding people's stories. I have a firm belief that once you understand where someone came from or their story, and just a little bit more about them, you give them a lot more space and understanding. And I have always loved that. So
I can speak from experience that you're very inquisitive. You like to sit down with people and ask lots of questions. And I think people like that. People appreciate that. It makes people feel good, right?
thanks, Preston.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously, you have been the recipient of my
I have
inquisitive ways.
24 years of interrogation.
Yeah, that's right.
It actually is pretty cool. It was fun for me to be at those two trainings and listen and watch her kind of do her thing, because as a therapist, she goes to work and she meets with people on a regular basis. And because of the confidentiality that a therapist and a client or patient have together, I don't hear a lot about those stories, of struggle and stoke in people's lives that she works with. And so it's been fun for me to be involved more and more doing these kinds of things together and to hear how incredibly knowledgeable she is. I know that she's always had an impact on people's lives. Even before she was a licensed therapist, she was a therapist. And so she was a natural at it. But
Don't tell Doppel that, please. We can edit that out. Thanks.
you have a gift. And it's cool to see what that gift is doing in people's lives. And so even though, yes, we are married, and so, this is fun to do it together, BrainStoke and also your therapy practice, along with Aspire Counseling, but it's fun to see the work that you're doing, and it's cool. I'm proud of you. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. I
Yeah.
love being part of the team. It's really inspiring to, like you said, I mean, the impact that these coaches had, it was so fun to see. Just kind of the stories that they shared with us and the impact that they have across the state of Utah. With all of these riders, 7,000, that's a lot. That's a lot of kids at a lot of different stages in their lives and development. And it was cool to hear.
Yeah,
from
I think all three of us had coaches come up to us afterwards, and every one of them had some example or some story of a family or a student on their team that was dealing with something, and how the information we shared, they were going to take it to their team and talk to them about some of the issues that they're dealing with and how they can cope and manage to sort through all the things that they experience. So
BrainStoke is partnering with the Utah High School Cycling League because Preston and I are cycling geeks, and we've both been coaches of, our local team, which is Morgan High. And so it was a natural thing for us to be, if we were going to do this podcast, that we wanted to partner with the league because we're so passionate about the sport and because we've learned to grow and love the student athletes in our own area. It's dramatically impacted our own families and our lives. And so we love being involved in the league. And Dallin Atack and his team with, the Utah League are doing an incredible job. To give some context to people who may not necessarily know, the Utah or the cycling league in the country is huge, and Utah is the largest program throughout the country. And so Utah is known for being, a force in terms of student athletes and the racing and training that's going on in the state. And so it's pretty cool to see what the league is doing. And it was fantastic to meet with those coaches, like Liza said and Preston said. And the objective with those trainings was to give some context to the coaches about some of these tools that we're going to dive in on our episode today. And what we've done with the league is to prompt the coaches to submit stories of struggle and stoke so that we can have other people on the podcast as guests. But you don't have to be involved in the cycling league to submit a story of struggle and stoke. And so if you go to the website, brainstoke.com, and you submit the form, we'll get it. And we look at those, and we would love to increase our guests who are coming on the podcast. And, again, the goal is to share the stories of struggle and stoke with the intent to inspire other people that they matter and that they know that they're not just going through, their own lonely story of mental health. So hopefully that gives people some context of what we're trying to do, both with the league and more on a broader scale, that we want to hear other stories. So please go to the website, check it out, and submit to be on the podcast.
And I think everybody's got a story, regardless of your involvement in cycling or sports, or maybe you're into drama, you're on the chess team, whatever. Everybody's got a story, and I think it needs to be heard. So we would love to share all those kinds of stories. All right, so let's get into the meat of what we talked about with these coaches at this training. And I think that the key thing to kick this all off is that everybody is dealing with the stresses of life. Likewise, so are these kids. They're dealing with the stresses of life that come from school and their social interactions. And then they've got to come to a practice, and you expect some great performance at practice, but little do we know that they've got all this other stuff going on in their heads. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something we all need to understand. How do we help these kids knowing that they've got stuff going on, but we don't really know what it is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what you touched on during the coaches training that I think was so great is that you could see coaches kind of making notes and figuring out that it's not just things they can talk to their riders about, but it happens in our lives, all of us. These like stressors that are just a part of life. And oftentimes when someone comes for the first time to my office, they will sit down with me and they will say some form of, I just want to get rid of anxiety. I just want it to go away. And I think I don't know if it's because it's on Instagram so much or, Snapchat, they're talking about it with each other, but like anxiety is just a preparatory chemical that everyone on the planet is going to deal with. And so learning to, first of all, understand what's happening inside your body when you feel anxious. I feel like that's a really critical piece, is understanding what's happening. And then what do I do with it? Whether I'm transitioning, like you said, from getting a bad grade at school to shake it off to moving on to practice, to walking a bike from the team tent up to the start line, to hearing the audience calm and being ready to start a performance, to
being on the sideline. I mean,
really stressed at home. Yeah, I was thinking of all these moms and dads that
totally.
might be listening.
Preston and I sat at races for years, and we were watching the kids on the race course kind of do their thing, and the parents on the sidelines were melting down, losing their minds. Like, parents didn't know necessarily how to deal with the anxiety they were having for their children in the races. And so it's not just a student athlete thing. This is parents on down to the youngest child. Anxiety is everyone, right?
And I think we do have a misconception
So
that we
anxiety's
will
good,
get
right?
so good at dealing with it that we won't experience it.
I guess
that
I
is
should
not it.
I should correct what I said. I don't know if it's good, but it's okay to feel anxious.
Yeah.
Right? We
Not
just need
only
to-
is it okay, it's unavoidable.
Yeah.
It's
But
completely
people have
unavoidable.
but people have a perception about how, that it can be healed, that anxiety can just be healed and go away, and now I'm healed of anxiety. So anyway, I interrupted you, but talk a little bit about that. What you see people coming in for, and maybe an expectation that, well, I'm here at therapy and I'm here to get healed of it, so I no longer have anxiousness in my life.
So the healing of it might be more of, I can manage it. Yes, it will happen. Yes, it will come. I can do something, but it is going to happen. So I think that's a really critical distinction of just not being so hijacked by it, so to speak.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sure. So what you're walk through that maybe as an example. Someone comes in and they're having their symptoms, they would say is, I'm just really anxious. I have anxiety attacks. I get up in the morning and I start to panic about going to school, and then I don't want to go to school, and parents are fighting kids to, you got to go to school today. You can't miss out. Their anxiety is elevating as a parent, and the child's anxiety is like it becomes this, there's now a Texas twister going on in the house of anxiousness. And so how do you start that conversation when they come in?
Yeah. So when someone comes into my office and is telling me about symptoms of anxiety, essentially it is being their amygdala is on high alert. And so first of all, I would want to talk about what is the amygdala. And we talked to the coaches about it. So I'm thinking we want to talk about that here today. But your amygdala is just it's a cell cluster, for a lack of a better word, but it is a part of your brain in your limbic system that is in charge of your fight or flight chemicals. It's just in charge of releasing your fight or flight chemicals. So here's the interesting thing about your amygdala. It behaves just like a smoke detector. And we were talking to the coaches about this, and I feel like this is such a universal concept that if you can understand this, you can help not only your child, but yourself. If this is a parent listening, or a child or a teen can hear this and relate to it and say, oh, I know what that feels like. That's my amygdala. And when I'm working with a teen or a kid, we will name our amygdala. I was not very creative and named mine April. April the amygdala. And yes, it is my alter ego, because I will say when I'm feeling anxious, thank you, April. Thank you, April.
Is there an April in your past we need to talk about?
I think it's just the A. Amygdala starts with A. I'm a very visual learner. And when I work with, I actually don't work with young kids, but I did at the beginning of my career. And we would always draw our amygdala, and it's this fluffy, cute little character. But and it starts with an A. Okay, so it's April. And
I think I can use this.
you're. This is
Turn
going
off
south.
your April.
Jackson, help me. I'm scared. Back to the smoke detector. So, your amygdala, and if you are a parent listening, help your kids name their amygdala. It's a great exercise of like, you know what, this is your amygdala trying to protect you, right? So it behaves just like a smoke detector. So, Preston, when does the smoke detector go off at your house?
Well, it tends to go off when the battery goes out, and it's usually like 3 a.m.
Yep.
in my daughter's bedroom. Right?
Yep.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. Only when the battery goes out. It's super obnoxious. It's supposed to be helpful for
when there's
smelling smoke.
Right.
Yeah, but usually, and if BrainStoke, we'll edit that. If BrainStoke doesn't make millions of dollars, my second idea here for family wealth is to invent a smoke detector that can only lose its battery at noon. It's like it's all it can do.
It's a great idea. It's a
It
wonderful
only
idea.
goes out at noon. So the smoke detector and your amygdala, same concept. Preston, does your smoke detector care if you burnt bacon in the kitchen or if your house is actually on fire?
Mine does not.
No.
And it only goes off when we burn bacon.
Yeah. How many people, a very small percentage of the people listening will have actually experienced a house fire.
Right.
But everyone has heard their smoke detector, right? So what do we know just by that sentence alone? That it sends faulty signals, right? Your smoke detector does not care if it's just smelling smoke, and so it alerts you. And your amygdala works the same way. It hears information, it sees something, it senses something, and it sends a signal to the rest of your body to get ready to fight, flight, or freeze. It doesn't even ask. It just does. And so the chemical races through your body, and then you have all this chemical running through your body, right? And so what do you do with it? It's a preparatory chemical. If you're about to start a race, how helpful is that? Are you going to pedal faster? Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Because now you have this energy going through your body. If you're sitting in math class, is that going to be very helpful?
Probably not.
No. Yeah. So chemical unused feels like a stomach ache, feels like clammy hands, feels like a clouded head. So I talk with a lot of teens about you feel like you're going to throw up. A very common feeling for that because you're not doing anything with the energy that your body has supplied you with. Does that make sense?
Totally.
So, if you can help a child understand that concept, or a teen or you yourself understand that concept of, oh, that's just my body's preparatory chemicals. The first thing that happens in a panic attack when someone's like particularly anxious, just had a bout of crazy anxiousness that sets into a panic attack, what the most common thing people try to do is to hold still. And if you have all those chemicals racing through your body, the worst thing you could do is hold still, right? Because you're not doing anything with it. So I will talk to teens about move, stand up, roll your ankles, roll your wrists, something that moves the chemical, and that will dissipate through your body. You will no longer feel that same energy, but you got to give it time and you got to give it movement. So that's your
How much
amygdala.
time? Like how long does a panic attack last?
Yeah, this is such a great concept. There is no such thing as a stopwatch in an amygdala, right? There's not but 20 minutes is a pretty common time frame.
So
for
the amygdala could be firing for 20 minutes potentially, or more or less.
You can continue to have the drops, but it's probably a shoot of the adrenaline, the stressor chemicals coming through, and the adrenaline, cortisol, norepinephrine shoots through, and then it dissipates.
Gotcha.
But the reason why it's such a critical chemical combo for performance is it does enhance performance. It will help you pedal faster. It will help you jump higher, perform better. It's great for that.
I mean, that's what its goal was. I mean, originally in the caveman stage, it was like, there's a lion chasing me to eat me for dinner, and I need to run away. Danger,
Something
like
needed
go,
to
take
tell
off.
their brain, yes, something needed to tell the original humans, that's not a safe thing. That's a very big cat. And I'm not going to pet that. I'm either going to need to fight it or get up a tree. So that's the...
So if you fast forward now, I'm just picturing, the example you're describing. So the student in the math class, anxiety comes on, they're feeling that fight or flight response. And because of the environment that they're in, they can't move to go do anything with it. Right. And so that, I guess that's the challenge is, naturally, I think most of us, when we get anxious, we don't necessarily say, I'm going to go run or walk or move my body to move the chemical through. We recognize it and we kind of want to, we just want to sit in it and just kind of like, I don't know, clam up. What's
Which
the
is
right
what
term?
happens, right? What happens is we want to just hold still and like hope it passes quickly. But there are other options besides just moving your body. Change your temperature. If you have a sweatshirt on with a t-shirt underneath it, take the sweatshirt off. Box breathing is another technique, because I know it sounds cheesy and therapeutic and you'll see it on TikTok or whatever, but when somebody says take deep breaths, they actually work, right? Square breathing is just helping your oxygen and carbon dioxide flip, because you have too much oxygen during a panic attack. Your breathing shortens and you start to breathe really fast and shallow. And so if you can practice it to just slow your breathing, deep breaths, hold your breath for a few seconds, let the breath out, hold your breath for a few seconds, you will flip that chemical and your body will settle. You can do square breathing in class. You can do a temperature change in class. I mean, it sounds funny, like roll up your pant legs, take off your shoes in class, like change your temperature when you're having a panic attack.
And what are you trying to do in that moment? I know you're trying to fight off. Is that what you're trying to do, is fight off the anxious response? So or just, you know what I mean? What are you trying to accomplish by doing those things?
You are actually trying to move the chemical through your body.
Okay.
Right?
So
just
by taking off my hoodie, what is that doing?
It just helps your body regulate, right? Because you will feel a hotness. Right? You'll feel hotness. I don't think that's a word.
Well, sure it is.
Kind of is.
I feel hotness. Oh, wow.
I suffer from it all the time.
Hotness. Of course. So, you're just changing your temperature to help cool down your body. Or if you're shaking, put your sweatshirt on. Or you're just trying to help
Adjust
your
the chemical.
nervous system settle.
Okay.
But instead, what we want to do is we just kind of freeze and try to hold really still. And that's really hard for your body to move through the chemicals. And a very critical thought and this is the extreme of anxiousness, right? Is if you're having a panic attack in that moment, your brain is not real clear on thinking. It's very fuzzy.
That was going to be my next question is, okay, if they're sitting in a test and they're dealing with some anxiousness of some kind, maybe not even to the level of a panic attack, if they don't learn how to manage and work through it, they're going to really struggle performing on that test, right? Or whatever that assignment is. Gotta
Whatever
think.
that thing is. Yeah. So it's a practice. This is a practice. And that's why at the training we were talking about how uniquely prepared coaches are. You are practicing for these races. You practice for tests. You practice for a date. That's what homework is in school, is you are practicing, right? So if you never practice a skill, it is hard to use it in the moment, right? I
Yeah.
don't set dumbbells in front of me and I don't, set 25-pound dumbbells and expect myself to be able to lift them. Actually, ever in my entire lifetime, I will never expect that of myself. But I would need to warm up, right? From doing 10s to 15s. So outside of feeling anxious, I would want to practice square breathing. This is what I say to clients when we're talking about, you are not going to avoid anxiousness, but we are going to be able to work through it, because it will happen and you have to decide how I'm going to handle it when I'm in it. And every anxious feeling does not result in a panic attack. That's
Right.
not going to happen.
No, but I can see for certain kids, like if going to school brings on anxiousness or they have had panic attacks, is that possibly why kids would choose not just they fight their parents on going to school? Just
Sure. Who wants to feel that feeling all the time?
that's a natural coping, right? I'm going to fight going to school because that's where I feel the most anxious, or I have a test today and I'd rather not feel anxious about that, so I'm out. I just don't want to go.
So that takes us to the next step of, okay, if a parent is dealing with this scenario that Tom's bringing up, how does the parent now manage and understand what's going on in their child's life, and how do they help sort through that? I know that's a loaded question beyond belief, but I think
It is loaded.
I think all of the parents hearing this right now are like, yeah, that's what he did last week.
Yeah.
What do I do to deal with that?
Yeah. So if someone were to come in, when I work with someone that's dealing with a lot of anxiety, I want to have a vocabulary shift of the way we even think about how we deal with stressors, instead of trying to see things as they do this bad or they do this good or I'm doing it right or wrong. We want to try and talk through things as a spectrum. Everyone that comes into my office without fail will say to me at some point, I pretty much could say every single client has said, I just need better skills. I need better coping tools. In some form or fashion, they will say that sentence. And that's an introduction to a different vocabulary of, you are coping. Everyone is coping, whether they are overeating, whether they are biking a ton, whether they are drinking too much, whether they are going on a trip every third weekend. Everyone manages stress somehow. So I have them kind of list out what do they do when they feel stress. And we list it out on this spectrum. And if we can talk about the way we cope and deal about in a spectrum feeling, and way over here on the left-hand side, and it feels a little personal since I'm left-handed. I don't know why the negative has to be over here, but it feels like I'm going, you'll have to see this on the YouTube, I guess. But the unhealthy is way over here on the left, all the way over to the healthiest things you do to manage stress. And we are complex beings. Nobody I have met is only doing negative, unhealthy, and nobody I've met is only doing positive. They're somewhere on this spectrum all the time. And so if we can talk about coping, not in, you're doing that really bad. Oh, you do that so well. You are just always killing it. Not bad, good, not right, wrong, just coping. Then we stop seeing what we're doing as this bad thing, and we start to see, like, is there something else? Could I move the peg to just one healthier step? I've joked around a lot. I say this to my kids, to Tom, to any client. If this person is hungry, I'm having fries. If I'm starving, I don't care what you tell me about.
This segment brought to you by Chick-fil-A.
Oh,
We pay
you know
full
me
retail
better
price.
than that.
Waffle
It's Five
fries?
Guys.
Five
It's
Guys,
Five
okay.
Guys, please. It is definitely not waffle fries. Do you know me at all?
Yes, I do.
Send the
She
check.
does not discriminate.
What?
Five Guys, send the check.
Send the
Or
check.
else that will
Thank
be
you.
redacted Chick-fil-A.
Oh, I love it.
So we all are coping, right? And I may know, I'm not going to have fries every breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That would be a particularly unhealthy coping skill. But I'm going to have fries sometimes. And I put that right in the middle for me of my spectrum. Like, I could do better. Or I could do maybe some healthier things. I could do some unhealthier things too. But it helps the conversation of we are all trying to cope. So way long answer, Preston, but circling it back to what do parents do is that kid is just trying to deal. So the not going to school or the anxiousness they feel about academic pressure or like actually having a conversation of what happens at school. Like, when does that happen? What happens in your body? And actually helping the kid or self, if it's an adult listening, connect the dots of when do I feel this and what am I doing to manage it? And where is it on the spectrum? I talk about the least healthy coping skill being suicide because there's no do-over. Even some really unhealthy coping skills, you're going to wake up the next day or you're going to have the hour after that coping skill and go, ugh, that doesn't feel great. The consequences are natural, right? When you go for a run, when you go for a long bike ride, what's the consequence of a long bike ride?
Awesomeness.
Yeah. Is there a consequence?
Yeah. So I'm so glad you said that, Preston, 'cause
Incredible quads and a tan. I don't know. That's what I'm liking.
Yeah.
So
But we equate often that a consequence is negative and consequences can be positive. When my kids were young, and Jackson can decide if he wants to edit this out, but if he would do something wrong, he has 2 younger siblings who would say, Jackson needs a consequence. He needs a consequence. Like, he hit me. Jackson needs a consequence. And it would be this like there wasn't a positive thing that
Super
could happen.
negative, yeah.
Yeah.
the hammer gets dropped.
Yeah. But a consequence for reaching out to a friend or a consequence for studying for a test. There's a consequence to that, right? I'm going to feel prepared about the test.
You're talking about the positive side of the positive coping, healthy coping. But as I even think about our own family and how we operate, so what's interesting, Preston, you'll love this, is that on the Fridays, Liza will come home and I'll say, "How was your day? Stressful?" And inevitably, I'm like, I can smell the fries. Not because I smell like the grease or whatever, but I almost can know like, something's fishy here. She's been coping with fries. And so,
One could only wish that was happening on a therapy day.
but what's interesting about that is it's fries, and we joke about it now, but there's a certain amount of guilt and shame with how you choose to cope. And, we're joking about it as fries, but in reality, in real life, a lot of families, when the coping mechanism is being used is unhealthy, or maybe whether it's healthy or unhealthy, maybe culturally where we live, the different types of environments that we're in, whether family, school, your neighborhood, the church you belong to, those are all different factors in, do you feel shame with how you cope?
Mm-hmm.
Is the choices you're making in your coping, are you in an environment where it's safe to have others know how you cope, or do you hide them, lie about them, right? And now we're getting into like parents and how they are trying to identify not just the negative coping or unhealthy coping in their kids' lives, but what happens when, it's this double down factor where you can see unhealthy coping going on in your children's lives, but you also know that they're compounding it with trying to hide it or deny it. And so how do you address that?
Yeah.
Because it seems like it's going to turn to a fight
Yeah.
if you question it as a parent.
Yeah, if you attack like, well, you're just eating the gallon of ice cream, or if you're, staying up all night watching Netflix and you're getting 2 hours of sleep, like if you attack the unhealthy, what's the outcome? How does that feel to children?
Yeah, I often will ask parents when I work with a teen, I'll have a few sessions with the teen by themselves, and then I'll have a check-in. I call it a parent check-in with the parents. And inevitably, the teen will think we've broken confidentiality, and she's gonna tell my parents everything I said. And I try really hard to reassure them that's not true. And I feel like I should have some sort of gold star board for myself, because every time I've had a parent check-in, a teen will come back and feel like things got better at home because of this very conversation of at what age, I will say, sit with parents during this parent check-in and say, at what age do you remember liking being told what to do, or stop liking? Because I think nobody likes to be told what to do, but at what age did you stop liking that?
For me, it was about 4.
Yeah.
It was,
yeah,
I mean, it was
it would
pretty
have
young.
to be young,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. If you have met a toddler, then you know when that age is.
Yeah.
Right.
No. It's like one of the first words we learn, right? And for some odd reason, I do a lot of couples work too, and this comes up in couples too a lot. But for some odd reason, we think our children will, when we point out this negative coping, or when we point out the thing that they are not doing, we think that they're going to turn to us and go, "That is fantastic insight, Dad.
Thanks for that advice. Right.
Man, you nailed it. Thank you for pointing that out." And we're going to go, "You're welcome, son." And then some after school special music's going to play, and it's just going to be amazing.
And that's one to grow
And that's
on.
one to grow on. Dun, 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 dun. That was the NBC star. That is not a thing. And so with this, and this is maybe a whole nother show, but this idea of changing our vocabulary to, in the least sarcastic way, looking at your teen and saying, "How's that going for you?" I say it a little more sarcastically sometimes. "How's that working out?" Right? And let them connect the dots that being on their screen for excessive amounts of hours is not getting them past the chemistry class. Instead of you pointing that out and telling them, letting them figure that out. And that can be excruciating as a parent
Mm-hmm.
How
to
do you
actually
do
let
that?
them fail the class. Or I often will say to parents, don't work harder than they are. Work harder at loving them. Do not work harder than they are for them to pass the class, for them to do well on the team. If it is to be, it is up to me. We all hear that, but they need to want to be good at it more than you want them to be good at something.
So when you think through that, don't work harder than they are, we're talking in the context of parents trying to help their children with how they're dealing with stressors in life and how they cope, in an effort to, for parents to be able to be better coaches at helping their kids.
Mm-hmm.
But what about parents and the way that they cope, just the way that they approach? Because as parents, our stressors are the kids, right?
I would check out your own spectrum.
They are our. And so when you think about that, when a child is having trouble and their stressors are manifesting, in their life, we as parents have to then determine how are we going to cope with that. And I've heard you describe the story of the roller coaster in terms of how parents cope with what their kids are coping with. Could you share that and just kind of describe, how parents can think about the way that they deal with, stressors and how they cope?
Sure. So I don't have a trademark on this yet, but maybe this will be a first heard here on BrainStoke.
Could this go viral?
I hope not.
Okay, well, let's give it a title before it goes
I
viral. What are you going to
hope
call it?
not. They're just roller coaster parenting.
Colossus.
Is what is right?
Okay.
So Preston, we'll
Lagoon.
use you as an example.
Oh, great.
Have you enjoyed a blessed day at Lagoon?
Wait,
with
hold
your
on,
family?
Preston.
You don't want me to go here. Do you know my? No,
What's your April named, by the way?
I haven't come up with one yet.
Okay, well, you got to. You got to name your
This-
April.
There's so many roads we're on here.
Sorry.
My lagoon.
So yeah, I didn't know you. Do you have a traumatic experience about Lagoon we need to work through right here live?
Yeah, maybe. Yes. I went there as an adult. I've only been to Lagoon, I think, like 3 or 4 times.
In your life?
Yes, correct.
I knew we were blood brothers.
Oh, wow.
And one of those, the last time I went, I was with my wife and another couple. So we were adults. which
Okay,
is
adults
an
at
issue.
Lagoon, that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, I agree. We went straight to the Colossus. That's the loopy one, right?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Okay.
And he acts like he doesn't know.
No. Well, I got off that thing literally sick as I've ever been, like super dizzy.
Oh, this is going to help our analogy.
Yeah, I mean, I sat down at the picnic tables right outside that ride, and I just sat there and decided I had to go home. I was that sick. So I did one ride. We left that other couple at Lagoon, and we went home.
There's so
Yeah.
much. There's so much there.
Yeah.
Number one, your wife's loyalty.
To
When cotton candy and churros await, and
She
she
was-
left the park
she was
with
probably
you.
heartbroken. I mean, let's be honest.
Wow,
Yes.
The
That's-
story is growing.
that is impressive.
I haven't been
love
back.
it.
And you know what? I was actually just taking my daughter today to tennis, and we drove past Lagoon. And she's like, Dad, I would love if you and I went to Lagoon together. She literally said that to me. And I sat there.
Did
like,
you have a panic attack?
almost? I'm like, I don't know if I can go back to that place.
Yeah, that would be
And-
scary.
So we had to kind of talk through, hey, that's not a happy place for me.
Yeah.
Anyway, I will go to Lagoon, but I will probably be that guy standing on the sidelines.
Is on the left of coping. He's out here.
He's way.
Anyway,
yeah.
okay, so I
Oh
got to
my
turn the time
word.
over to
Okay.
you.
Well, do you have a memory of taking kids to Lagoon?
No.
Okay.
I-
Well,
yeah, my
we
kids have been there
inflicted it.
once.
I inflicted it on Tom a lot.
Okay.
Being a Farmington native.
Yeah, of course.
Like
you walked
it's
there.
like sacrilege not to.
You knew the
have a
back-
season pass.
There's a back door. You can
Liza
whoa.
worked at
Whoa,
Lagoon
whoa,
Campground.
whoa! We're
Did you really?
I sure did.
Wow.
And as a lifeguard back in the day.
Oh, of course you did. Wendy Peppercorn.
Help, Jackson! I'm so scared.
Yep.
Oh my word!
Sandlot.
These headphones.
Who has the glasses on
You
right
are-
now?
You are now.
Squints.
Oh,
Here
no.
we go.
Jackson, you must edit.
Oh, we've gone
Let's
sideways.
go back to
All
the
of
roller
my-
coaster. My
all
word.
of my
Oh, shoot.
man, all of my credibility out the window with that last sentence. Okay, so in said parent check-in session that we were just talking about, I will ask the parents if they could remember taking their kids. So taking your kids to Lagoon when they were little, right? And you put them on the little kiddie rides, right? And they kind of circle around. You can even picture this if you haven't had the experience. But what did our kids do, Tom? As they circle around, you're standing outside the gate, you're hoping for like 2 minutes to answer an email or a text or just take a breath. and they're on the ride and they're circling around. What are they doing on the ride?
They're stoked. They're happy. They're waving. They're wanting to catch your attention. Like they want you to be on the ride with them.
Yeah. They want you involved at least.
Yeah.
They're dad, mom, right? They're waving at you. And if you look down while they're coming around, heaven help you, because they get louder. And most kids, you can witness it all the time. They will be trying to get their person's attention the whole time, right? So I compare that to your kids and just their emotional well-being. Is you are kind of standing outside of their ride, right? And when they're young, it's very easy for you to just look up, show comfort, wave. When they get older, and as they have, developmental milestones happening and puberty, and we're all going through all these chemical changes as an adolescent, they get on a bigger ride, right? And if you are like our kids, you are inviting, come, get on with me. And they go on the Colossus or Wicked and they loop all around. And when I get off a ride, I don't know, I'm very similar to Preston, where I'm like green going, oh, no, let's not do that again. And what are the kids doing?
Running to the next ride.
Running to the next ride.
Again.
That was fantastic. No effect, able to move on. I mean, not every kid, but just hypothetically, right? They run to the next ride. So think of that as emotions, right? If a kid comes home and they're really riled up about something, and you match that energy, which I call getting on the kid's roller coaster with them. If you get on the roller coaster with them, and a lot of people see that as good parenting, right? Well, why didn't you? Well, let's do this. Well, you should have. All the things, you match their energy and they are just on a track. And then inevitably, when you match a teen's energy with emotion, do you want to compete with a 17-year-old's testosterone level? No. I know I don't. You cannot compete with that. And so usually there's a blow up because you said something that they took the wrong way, or they felt criticized, or you think I'm so dumb, or that I didn't study for the test, or that I didn't try my hardest. All the things that likely the kid might already know. So that's the roller coaster, right? And then they get off and they go down to their room and you want to barf and they just skip along to the next one. They might, go stew for a little while. They might come upstairs and get on the next ride with you. But if you can stand back, and similar to like what you did when they were a really young child, but I call it it would be a Coke Zero in my world, but getting a Coke and a churro, and that you are there to show support. Let the entire emotional roller coaster happen. The kid may come in all fired up about something, all very upset about something. Instead of matching them, it doesn't mean you patronize, right? And you're deadpan, but you're just letting it happen and you're providing support. You're just being of comfort. That's really hard. That must be awful. That would be hard if that happened. And unless they ask you a question, what should I do? What would you do? That's a perfect space to mentor. I remember that feeling. It doesn't mean you can't share something with them, but oftentimes we jump to, I would have never done that if I was your age, or I would have never done this. And I know we made that mistake.
Or you should have, or
why didn't you?
Why didn't you? Why didn't you do it this way? Why didn't you do it that way? And so instead of the teen wrestling with the situation and helping it work through their mind, they're wrestling you, right? You're on this roller coaster together. And my dad doesn't understand me, and my mom's the worst. And they, instead of them actually thinking through solutions. But if you sit and wave or say, let's take a breath, that must be really hard, and let them come down. And as they kind of simmer, they will figure out their own solutions. So they will probably run to the next ride, right? A half hour later, something else will come up, or the next day. So you want to try to treat these moments of anxiousness for kids like a roller coaster. I'm just going to be here with my Coke and churro, and I'm going to support.
That's a great way, I think, for me to just think through, as a father, as a parent, how do I get healthier in my coping of how my kids are coping, instead of jumping on the train with them, on the roller coaster. For me to get on their roller coaster just compounds potentially their negative coping, because now I'm kind of compounding it with pressure, or, my opinions about how they're doing it may come off as shame or guilt, or, that they're being judged, so it's going to feel like I'm really more focused on them and their, inability to make good decisions. And that's not positive. It doesn't allow that space for conversation, in a positive way.
How do we practice that as parents? Because I'm just listening and I'm like, this is hard, because as I think through how I parent, I'm questioning their choices and decisions maybe more than I should, as I'm hearing.
Bro,
this.
I know you're
Holy
capable
cow.
of churro and Coke. It's like, yeah, well, get after it in there.
I think sometimes we mistake a churro and Coke as very hands off. And I have to say to your listening audience, I call myself a recovering reactor.
Okay.
Right? I'm not a recovering alcoholic. I know people, I don't want to belittle that, because that is, there's so much power in that. But I call myself a recovering reactor, because I would say I would get on the roller coaster with my kids quite often. But part of understanding how we cope and changing our vocabulary and giving ourselves and our kids space to practice, to figure stuff out. It's just a lot more space and grace. Once we do that, that is the practice. That is us going, oh, I totally do that. Oh, how do I do it just a little bit different? That would be moving my own peg.
Yeah.
Right? That's moving my own peg. And if I can move my peg, my kid's more likely to go, he reacted differently than we've had. That was different from what the heck happened there? Why did he not freak out on me?
We're really proud of our mom for becoming.
She's recovered.
Yeah, I really do think, Preston, it's a practice. It is new. It is different. It is hard. But once you have a couple at-bats, I would call it, if you have a couple, the more at-bats you have with trying to respond versus react to something that is happening with your kids, you see that they then they come up with better solutions than you would.
It has been interesting watching what has occurred when you and I have been intentional in those moments to say we did it wrong, we're human, and then to go apologize to our kids and say, listen, we stink at this too, and to have a moment of apologizing to them and telling them, we're not getting it right and perfect all the time. In fact, we mess up a lot. It seems that in those moments of kind of elevated emotion in our home, that it's kept the dialogue channels open. Mm-hmm. It didn't all of a sudden like everybody hug it out and we go, dance together. But
I wish it would always end in a family game night, but it never happens for me. May I just say that on this podcast? I always want it to end in a big fun family game night. And it
by
never
the way,
does.
on the far left side of unhealthy coping, Liza believes the far right is some version of like
family
Uno
fun
or a game.
It's never Uno.
And Tom, if
just play cards.
I'm pretty sure family game night is on the far left side of your spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, we've got Lagoon, And then we've got game night.
I sure hope the owners of Lagoon don't
We
listen
have
to this podcast.
hanging pictures. I mean, I could continue to go on, but yeah, there's healthy and unhealthy. But there was a time in our married life. Again, Jackson took the brunt of this, but that the way that we coped with parenting stressors was on the unhealthy spectrum. And it's not to say that it's gotten significantly healthier, but we are at least putting a little more curiosity, asking, open-ended questions, trying to seek to understand before being understood. All of those things that frankly make a better marriage, just utilizing them in the relationship with children. And it seems like it's made a big difference. James will love us, whereas our other two will probably move to the Cayman Islands and not see us. So
Help us out.
Maybe a final question or one more. At what point should a parent seek professional help?
Mm-hmm.
I know this could be a whole nother episode, but I think people probably wonder, when should I go have my son or daughter go see somebody, like someone at Aspire?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think knowing your child and recognizing patterns is probably the most critical marker of if you see dramatic changes. Kids will ebb and flow. There will be sad days, hard days, awesome hours. That is growing up. That is life. But if you're seeing dramatic swings in things they used to do and they're not doing them, or they're expressing a lot more agitation about something, I wouldn't jump straight to, we need you to go see someone, but I would take an opportunity to ask and some open-ended questions. And by the way, it will very rarely happen at a time that's convenient for you.
Yeah.
It's usually, I say, apparently I need to also be sponsored by Coke, because I will say, chug a Coke and go down to their bedroom.
Yeah.
At like 9 at night or 10 at night, and maybe not like sitting on the bed making eye contact and having it be this serious talk, but just staring up at the ceiling. Like, tell me about your life. You will get a lot more conversation going when you come to them, and in spaces and places that are comfortable for them. And knowing your child and their patterns of behavior, and that's, this class always stresses them out. This isn't necessarily something that's this dramatic shift, or social situations have made this kid nervous for a long time, or make me nervous. It would make sense why it makes my child nervous. Just being aware and not being mad at yourself if you miss something, but also opening the door to them of, like Tom said, we have never parented, this child. Each child is so different. We haven't parented this child. Open the door to conversation of, if you ever want to talk to someone, we'd be more than happy to help you, to help facilitate that.
So it needs to be their choice. Is that the goal? I mean,
that would be ideal.
Utopia. That's where we go
hard.
again.
Well, it is hard. Oftentimes,
I'd like to go to therapy.
I actually have had clients say the parent said this was their idea, and it tends to go better because they have some buy-in.
Sure.
They definitely have some buy-in. There's extenuating circumstances that you just would, and we could talk about that, but mostly dragging a kid to therapy does not work.
Right. I assume so.
Yeah.
So
it seems like the households, as long as you've been a therapist, and it's been a dialogue in our family now, that the more families are willing to talk about mental health, and they actively work on destigmatizing mental health and getting help, the likelihood goes up for those kids to say and recognize in themselves, I'm doing more things on the unhealthy spectrum, and they're recognizing it.
Yeah.
They're getting in trouble in school, or they don't feel well, and so they're recognizing their own behavior. Those children are more likely to say when their parents, hey, should we reach out and maybe have you talk to a professional, a therapist? Those types of family environments, that tends to go better than, what? Do you think I'm broken?
Yeah, oftentimes if a kid is told they're going to therapy, it's we're kind of scapegoating what is happening in the bigger picture in their family life, right? That we need to fix this one kid, when really it's a family thing. It's a system thing of where is the anxiousness coming from? I can't prove it. Like, I've never seen it in Webster's dictionary, but I believe the definition for me clinically, personally, of anxiety is a lack of options. And if you can introduce your brain, your children, yourself, your system to options, anxiety goes down. Whether it's resources, whether it's many ways of coping, whether it's not putting so much shame or blame on yourself, just options for managing anxiety comes down.
Thanks for being with BrainStoke.
You're awesome. The toolkit is going to grow. I think I can see we're going to have you here pretty regularly. You're going to be a regular guest.
Is this the part where we say the studio is at my house? So I don't know that I have a choice.
You don't. That's the beauty of this.
April, we need you.
We didn't get to say all the awesome things about April.
Liza, bring April in here.
You are not to use April as some sort of alter ego.
I love this.
April, the bacon's on fire.
It's very real. I actually will
good.
say to April, when I'm teaching teens about like how do we quiet our amygdala, I will actually compare it to the end of a yoga class. How when you finish with yoga, right? What do you always say? Yes, I will say, Namaste, April. Thanks for warning me. I got this. Like, wait, hold up. I am treating this as a house fire. This is burnt toast. Or this is, Thank you, April. Namaste. I
So
got
your
it.
self-talk is with April.
Oh, self-talk all day long.
makes
If
so
you are
much
not
sense
talking
now.
to yourself, are you really living? That should be the tagline of this show.
It's true.